Do you know that teams who regularly engage in structured planning and review processes are more likely to achieve their goals? The reason, pretty simple. Teams who carry out a review of a past period, bringing forward lessons learned into a new period, will most likely not repeat past mistakes and will have a stronger sense of shared optimism to drive forward their new goals. And in this video, I'm going to be giving you the tools to do exactly that. Now, if you're finding me for the first time, obviously an introduction is in order. My name is Tola. In addition to being a C-suite executive, I'm also a strategic workplace mentor to career professionals who want to live life on their terms, stand out in the workplace for consistently delivering the right results, and build their influence without the overwhelm or the burnout. Now, on to today's conversation. Now, you're a team leader. It's the beginning of a period, whether it's January 1st, April 1st, October 1st, July 1st, it's the beginning of a new period. And you believing that your team is going to be able to go forward and achieve whatever goals and objectives has been handed over to you or which you've been able to define. Now, I'm going to say something which is pretty nerdy. The transition of the lunar eclipse into a new day does not in any way imbue your team with any superpowers to be able to achieve its goals. Now, I just made that up on the spur of the moment. You're never going to find it anyway. But bottom line here is this. Just simply because it's the beginning of a new period does not in any way tell you that your team will be able to go out and achieve its goals and objectives. And there are a couple of things which you need to be able to do. Number one, you need to be able to properly close the previous period that you are in. When we're talking about closing the previous periods properly, you need to be able to bring lessons from the previous period into your new period, and you also need to be able to bring the perception of success from the previous periods into the new period, because that creates momentum. And so what I'm going to give you first and foremost is the tool for you to be able to analyze your previous periods. Now, in analyzing your previous periods, there are four things which you need to be able to identify. Number one, you need to be able to identify your team's achievements during that period. You need to be able to identify the missed opportunities for the missed objectives which your team had during the period. You need to be able to identify the challenges which you faced, and you also need to be able to create a framework for a future forward plan for your team. Now, let's go into talking about every one of them one by one. So let's start with the first one, team achievements. What you're basically trying to do is you want to identify here what were the biggest successes of your team and what were the factors that contributed to these achievements. Now, it's interesting that most teams don't actually know how to identify, don't even know how to identify the achievement or even celebrate it. Once upon a time, I was going to be working with a team, and what I had done is ahead of our meeting, I had actually sent an agenda, and on the agenda, one of the items was I wanted the team to talk about their achievements and list it out. It was interesting that when we got to that point of the agenda, they basically just skipped it and were like, "No, let's move to the next thing." And I was like, "No, let's bring it back up." And the team lead actually said, "Oh, it's interesting that we have actually never considered what it is that we have done. We've never considered our achievements in terms of successes that we've brought. We've always just felt that we're just one of those teams in which the organization feels that we just keep on burning a hole financially into them." And, during the meeting, they were able to identify, okay, these were objectives that we achieved. These were the things which we were able to deliver. And that brought additional momentum to that team. So let's go into the process of you working through your team's achievements. First thing, you need to be very clear what the objectives were that represents an achievement. In identifying the objectives, one of the things you also need to be clearly state is you need to also point out the level of achievement that the level of achievement that constituted success for the team. This is very important because what you are effectively doing is that you are defining the minimum bar of performance that you expect from every member of the team. So effectively, let's imagine you even have a new person who is joining your team, and that's the first time he's been part of that whole experience. By just seeing how the team has collectively defined the level of achievement that constitutes success, it basically starts to awaken in his or her mind that, look, oh, this is what constitutes success for this team. So you've been able to identify the objectives. You've been able to identify the level of achievement which you reached that constituted success for the team. The next thing which you need to identify what were the strategies, the processes, that helped deliver that result. And the reason why this is something which you need to do is because your ability to identify what worked would help you to be able to repeat those success in the future. Yes, I know immediately I said that some of you already say, oh, the way things change, the way times have changed, it's not impossible that what worked before may not work in the future. Yes, but it's not impossible that what is going to work in the future is just going to be an adjustment or a variation of what has worked in the past. Really, sometimes it's just a case of the core foundation still remains, and all you're just doing is you're just adjusting the adaptation to current situation and current experiences. So when you're talking about team achievements, there are three things you need to work out. Number one, be clear about the objectives which you delivered. Number two, you also need to clearly state out the level of achievement which represents success for your team. And finally, you need to identify what were the strategies, the processes, the initiatives, what are the things literally that your team did to be able to deliver those results. Now, once you're done with team achievements, the next thing you have to go to is the missed objectives. Now, the reason why you want to go through missed objectives is that you're using it as a learning experience. So similar to the way in which you started your thinking for the team objectives, you have to clearly state out what were the objectives that you missed during the period. And then the next thing, you need to also point out what were the levels of achievement. Now, the reason why you're pointing out the level of achievement is you're communicating to your team that, look, it's not like we didn't do anything on this missed objective, but because we are only able to hit this, it means we missed the target. It's pretty simple as that. You are communicating to your team that, look, this level of performance does not constitute success. This level of performance constitutes a miss. But you don't stop there. The next thing which you actually have to do is actually the real juice of this particular process. You now need to, let me use the word, you now need to create an alternative reality. And in that alternative reality, you need to ask yourself, what could you have done differently to change the outcome? Literally, you are telling yourself that, look, okay, if we achieve this level of outcome, what could we have done that would have changed that outcome if we had to play it another time? Literally, you're creating an alternative universe whereby you have the capacity to deliver these results, and you're telling yourself, what would you have done to change the outcome? Then the third thing which you're going to do during this process is you need to identify the challenges faced. Now, the general thing for most of us is that when it comes to talking about challenges faced, we look at challenges faced strictly on the premise of missed objectives. But you have to look at challenges faced even for team achievements, because it's not impossible that, look, there are some objectives that you were able to achieve, but there were significant challenges that you faced, and you need to use those challenges as a learning experience. So what are you going to be doing in this particular stage? You identify the key challenges you faced and what did you do to address them. Once you've listed out what you've done to achieve them, you did to address them, the next thing you have to do, once again, you have to create an alternative universe. The alternative universe is pretty simple. If you had to face it again, what would you do to address it? In this particular case, you are more or less taking yourself into the position of, look, okay, yes, even though I faced this challenge and I was able to surmount it and I was able to deliver the results which I delivered, that's where it's a challenge that affected your team achievement. It's not impossible that there could have been a faster way in which you'd have addressed it that would have helped you to achieve your team objectives a lot faster. So that's the reason why when you're talking about challenges faced, it's not just challenges that you face that stop you from missing your objective, even challenges that you faced that you are still able to overcome. It's not impossible. There may be a better way for you to even overcome it in the future. And these are things which you need to be able to identify and pull out from your learning experience. You're doing this collectively as a team. So you're basically pulling from the learnings and the sharings of everybody across the whole table. Now, the final thing which you need to do in closing out a period, you need to do future forward. Now, future forward, literally, you're asking yourself, what are the things that, based on what you've been able to glean out from this previous period, that you would like to do differently in the next period to be able to improve and enhance your impact as a team. In this particular case, all you are basically doing is you are basically identify what are the ideas, initiatives, and strategies that will basically position my team as a top of mind team within the organization. And then you also identify what are the expected impacts that you expect for each particular initiative. Each particular initiative, you should have an impact that you're hoping that each one of them should be able to deliver. Now, once you're done with that, you're more or less closed out on closing that end of the period, and then you're getting ready to actually go into the new period. Now, going into the new period, the traditional thing everybody does is you basically just come up with list of goals and you're like, come on, let's go, 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 and go. So, but there's a way in which I want you to take it. And the way I want you to take it is that, look, I want you to do sort of like a cascade approach. First things first, you need to have a clear understanding of what your organization's objectives are. Now, in terms of understanding the objectives of your organization, I typically frame objectives of an organization in two buckets. Number one, you have your financial objectives, and then number two, you have your operational and strategic objectives. Now, of course, your financial objectives, they're pretty clear and pretty straightforward. We've all known that since the time of businesses. It's pretty simple. You want to achieve a particular revenue, you want to achieve a particular profitability, you want to achieve a particular expense ratio, all those sort of numbers-driven numbers-driven objectives. Then, of course, on the other side, you have operational objectives. Now, these operational objectives, they definitely, a number of them, they don't have any financial numbers tied. It could be, for example, let's imagine you're a pharmaceutical company. It could be a case of, look, you want to launch a particular product, at a particular point in time in the year, or whatever it is. It could be tied to, but basically you're tied to strategic initiatives and operational objectives. Now, the next thing which you need to be able to clearly understand is that, look, you've been able to identify your financial objectives, you'll be able to identify your operational objectives. The next thing which you need to be able to identify is what are the key drivers for the financial objectives, what are the key drivers for operational and strategic objectives. Now, let me explain what I mean by key drivers. Let's imagine an organization says we want to deliver a particular revenue of this particular amount. And to deliver that revenue, there's a certain amount of money that you need to spend for marketing. So, for example, you could have it that, look, you need to have a marketing budget of whatever the amount is. That is a key driver for a financial objective. Or, for example, let's imagine that you say that, look, your net profit, you want to achieve a particular net profit. And one of the items which you've noticed within the context of your income statement is you have a high debt level. You can decide that, look, you need to significantly reduce and pay out your debt by whatever percent. That becomes a key driver for your financial objective based on the way you've been able to analyze your financial objectives. And then, of course, under your operational and strategic objectives, you also need to have key drivers for that. And the key drivers, so for example, let's imagine you want to launch a particular product. The key driver could be a case of, look, you need to sign an MOU or an agreement with a particular partner who's going to help you in terms of being able to deliver the launch of that particular product, those sort of things. Now, one of the things you have to realize within the context of how this is all framed, your financial objectives most often end up being the final results that you have to deliver. And your key drivers for financial objectives, they feed into financial objectives. And in certain cases, even your operational and strategic objectives actually feed into your financial objectives. And let me give an example. So let's imagine you have a financial objective that you want to achieve a certain level of revenue performance. A strategic and operational objective could be the launch of a particular product. Meaning that if you launch that particular product and you have a successful launch for it, it's going to significantly constitute to that sales revenue. So being able to completely understand how everything falls within the framework of what the organization is trying to deliver and what the organization is trying to bring out is very, very much important. Because once you can understand these objectives and the key drivers for these objectives, it makes it a lot easier when you have to get to the point of actually defining the objectives for your team. So we're done with understanding how the company works. Now let's go into what you need to do when it comes to defining your team's goals and targets. Now, to define your team's goals and targets, I typically recommend don't go beyond 3, But I've had situations whereby some of the people I've worked with, they say they want 5. I mean, they'll go as much as 5. And I go, okay, well, if you feel that it's going to provide a lot more clarity to you and your team, okay, go with 5. But usually that 5 in itself, it's a big banger. You understand? 3 is always a lot easier to keep everybody focused, especially when you have when you have the goals and objectives very, very tight. And of course, the typical thing is recommended. Use your SMART framework in terms of this should be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time bound, all those sort of things. You need to make sure that, look, you have that in place when it comes to your goals and target. It's not just highfalutin sugar candy goals and objectives that you are throwing out there. Now, once you're clear in terms of your goals and objectives, the next thing which you need to be clear is this: you need to be clear in terms of what are the lead initiatives that are going to drive the success of those goals and targets. The reason is that you need to keep this front and center. So let's imagine for a sales team. Sales team has a responsibility to deliver a particular volume of sales, right? And to deliver that particular volume of sales, some of the initiatives they have is they need to run certain marketing campaign. That becomes a specific project, a specific initiative that they need to identify. It needs to be something that they put front and center, so that you are simply telling that, look, to achieve these goals, I basically have to make sure that I do this. Now, one thing which you need to do after identifying your goals and objectives is you need to be able to identify how your goals and objectives impact the overall company results. That's something you need to be able to identify. Now, in understanding how your goals and objectives impact the overall company results, we need to understand the 3 frames of thinking that exist within an organization. Within an organization, there are 3 frames of thinking. There's the product thinking, there's the customer thinking, and there's the corporate or organizational thinking. And this drives how everybody basically sees themselves. The product thinking is basically thinking in terms of product development and product deployment. Basically, from start to finish, cradle to grave of creating a product and getting the product as the right product in the right state for the market. The next thing, which you are customer focused, basically your goal is focused primarily on distribution. And then on the other side, where you have the corporate thinking, in that particular case, you're more thinking that, look, how can I build a product and distribute it in a way that I am still able to keep myself successful as an organization. So if you look at that, you can almost tell in terms of which team falls in which particular bucket. So for example, let me use the example of a pharmaceutical company. For example, your research and development team will come under your the deployment and development. Your manufacturing will come under there. And then, for example, your marketing, your sales, your customer service, your customer experience, they would come under your product distribution. And of course, you'd have your legal team, your risk management, your financial control, all those will come under your corporate. Now, understanding the frames of thinking of all these particular departments and all these particular departments within an organization helps in terms of understanding the sort of impact that you're going to be envisioning yourself for the organization. So depending on where you fit in within the box, you can more or less tie your impact to the organization in terms of whether it's the financial or operational objectives of the organization. So you need to be clear in terms of that. The next thing which you need to be able to identify is you need to be able to identify the major dependencies that you need to achieve your objectives. Now, when we're talking about major dependencies, we're talking about relationships and resources and functions that you need for success. You're talking about things outside of your department. You live within an ecosystem, within an organization. So it's not just you alone. It's not just your department. You need to be able to ask yourself, who are the other people within the ecosystem that I strongly need to lean on? So for example, like the example we started with of a sales team trying to deliver a sales target, they know one of their major dependencies is your marketing and corporate communications, because they need them for success. It's pretty simple as that. The next thing you need to be able to do as a team is you need to be able to identify the potential challenges. Pretty simple. You need to be able to identify the foreseeable risk and whatever obstacles and bottlenecks. And you're not just writing them simply because you just want to know them. Because why? The next thing you need to do is you need to be able to come up with mitigation tactics. You're more or less saying that, look, I envision that I'm going to have this issue, I'm going to have this issue, and I'm going to have this issue. And these are the strategies that I hope I'm going to help to address those particular issues. Then you need to ask yourself, what are the basic KPIs and matrices that you're going to be tracking during the period to be sure that you are still en route to you being able to deliver the goals and targets. And then, of course, you need to be able to ask yourself, what are the needed support that you need from senior management? Because you need to start cultivating that as quickly as possible. There are certain goals and objectives that you're going to pursue for yourself that is significant enough that you need senior management involvement in it, and you need to start cultivating that as quickly as possible. Now, the final thing that you need to do here is this. Now, this, and the reason why I always insist on this with the people that I work with, my clients, is that, look, it's pretty simple. You need to have a bias for action once you've been able to identify the goals and objectives that your team has. And so really what I always say is that, look, set a next action steps of things that you're going to do within the next 48 hours. Yes, I've had some of the people that I worked with are like, no, would actually prefer a 1 week. Okay, no problem if you prefer that. But the whole idea is that to have a bias for action, that, look, once you've been able to develop all these goals and objectives and everything, you need to go into implementation mode in terms of the things which you want to do as a team and as a team and as individuals. Now, the beauty about this is that what you've done for your team, you can actually cascade it to individual members of your team, so that just the same way you've been able to build up everything for your team, you can actually cascade it to individual team members, whereby each team member would have their own goals and objectives, so that at the beginning of the period you already have that. And then it's not at the end of the period that both of you are sort of arguing in terms of what constitutes success, what constitutes, appraisal conversations no longer become battle of the planets. It's something a lot more collaborative in terms of us being able to identify going forward plans and going forward strategies. Now, everything that I've talked about today, it's available in an easy document which you can actually work with. So what I'm going to do is this: I'm going to leave a link under this video where you can actually just click on it and you can actually get the complete package that allows you to be able to do this whole process. So from you being able to close out on a period, from you being able to the point of you being able to actually envision the new quarter, every single thing that you need to do step by step in terms of being able to follow the framework one at a time, you would have that in that document. So you'll find the link somewhere under this video. And I really look forward to you being able to tell me stories of how this framework has been able to help you push your team to the next level. And more than that, I actually look forward to seeing success in you and in your team. Thank you very much.